All right, I'm going to get started. It's 7:36, and I'm going to try to go at a slow, easy pace to get through this, but I do want to try to leave some time for Q&A at the end of it, and then there may be some follow-up stuff from this as well. So I'll reiterate that I've tried to condense down a lot of information from about a 4-hour class into, an hour and a half just to talk on some subjects. And I'll start by saying that, like a lot of you, I'm sure at some point you've said, I wish my hobby could pay for itself. And that was me about 10 years ago when I decided I wanted to move up to a full frame camera. And I was like, oh, this is getting expensive. How can I make this pay for itself? I bring that up only because here I am, it's 10 years later. And with a partnership with Barry, that's put me in a position to do something like this through Benton Downs. I find myself in a condition where the hobby does pay for itself. It's actually turned into 2 businesses, which means thicker tax returns and everything else, but it's worth it. It's worth it, at least for me anyway. So this is a little bit of just what I've learned on my journey over the last 10 years about doing this. And I'm going to talk about a little about who's an expert, because I may not be an expert in everything. I may not be an expert in anything. I have learned over a lot of trial and error what kind of works and what doesn't work. And there are probably people on this call on some of the things I'm going to talk about that may be better at this than I am and actually have a better idea or more information. I don't know. But I wanted to just kind of set the stage for all of this information I'm giving you. It just comes from my experience. And again, there could be somebody else who has more information. And if you do, and you want to share that at the very end, you have a more current piece of information on a particular topic, feel free to raise your hand or whatever we need to do, because the technology changes. So the platforms that are out there, one platform will buy another. If you think about Flickr, it was bought by SmugMug, and so there's changes that are always happening in the marketplace. And then the way you access a market to try to sell your work and stuff, that changes. The methodologies that are available to do it. How we create our images with different types of cameras and different lenses, and how we edit them, and new software, AI or Topaz or stuff like that. All of that changes. And so whatever works today may not be the exact solution for tomorrow. I would say that, find something that works for you now, and then start your journey toward being an expert on your process. You can try to mirror somebody else's if you want. If they do exactly what you do, exactly the way you do it, in exactly the same market, to the exact same kinds of clients, then maybe exactly how they do it would work for you. But I would say that what you should do is just go ahead and start your journey. And from there, you will, I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of Knox people joining. You will become an expert in this process. And then the reason there's so many different platforms, and you're going to see this when we go through this, is that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And it's because we all run different types of businesses. So just be aware that the reason there's so many options is because there's so many different business models out there, and how people are doing it. Okay, so let's keep moving here. So here's kind of our agenda. We're going to talk about editing, how it's different, editing for print versus editing for your screen, what you need to pay attention to there. We're going to talk about printing, where and how to do that. We'll talk a little bit about terminology and resolution, shipping, marketing, art versus business, and then selling, and the different platforms, how they differ, what's of value to you, and we'll talk about that for a little bit, because everyone may have different things that are important to them. So let's talk about editing. So this image is I tell people this all the time. It's kind of the image that launched me into my photography journey. I just thought I wanted to take pictures, and I wanted to take pretty pictures. I wanted to create art. At the time, all I knew was that I wanted to take pictures. I didn't yet have the language to speak what the voice inside me was wanting to say. And I had gone out to, I had bought me a camera because I had completed my training for my Ironman triathlon. I went to Arizona. I completed the Ironman triathlon, and then we're on our way back, and we're in Peoples Valley, Peeples, Peoples Valley, Arizona. It's in the afternoon. We're coming back. It's fall, beautiful color, cottonwoods, these leaves. It was just incredible. And I kept driving down the road going, oh my God, oh my God. Finally, I turned around and went back and I took this picture. And when I got home and posted it, everybody liked it. And in particular, my wife, who said, oh my God, I want that printed for my home office. So we were just putting in a new home office for her. She graduated law school, was starting her own practice. And so I printed this image out. I edited it to the best of my ability at the time, which I will tell you was not very good. And I printed it out, went through a framing process with it and everything else. And after all that was done, I noticed right up here in the top right, oh my God, there's a piece of the power line I didn't chop out, or I didn't clone out. And it took me forever to clone all of that out. And this is a bad representation. Oh, sorry, my mouse is acting funky. So that was kind of my first experience there with going, if you're going to print something, maybe there should be a little more time and energy put in looking at the image. So then I went to Vancouver and I took this image, and I don't think it's particularly a great image, but at the time it was one of those, oh my God, I finally got one of those real wide angle where everything goes to the seat, goes up high and all of this. And I thought it was amazing. And I printed it out big on a canvas. It was the first time I printed anything big. And I don't know if you can see it, but along the edge of the tree is blue. The branches are purple, magenta. There's some green in some areas as well. So the chromatic aberration, and I didn't notice it on my screen. Now, granted, I have a better screen now than I had then, but still, I didn't notice it. And I just went and printed it. I didn't take my time and really kind of look at this very closely. And so I learned another lesson. It hung on the wall in my office at work until I said, I just can't look at that anymore. And I didn't have the money to reprint it because it was a big canvas. It cost me a lot of money at the time. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that. So then this image is from Hilton Head, and my wife's favorite place. And after she saw this image, she says, that one needs to hang above the fireplace. And so I edited this. I made it pretty and all of that, and and printed it big on canvas to put it in the fireplace. And it doesn't look real prominent, but right here is a big dust sensor spot and another one right there. And actually there's 3 or 4 more that pop up if you zoom in on the image and look at it closely. And I didn't do that. I thought, oh, it looks amazing. I was looking at the whole image instead of looking at what is actually going to show up when I print this. And so now when I go to submit an image to my website or to my gallery for print, before I ever print it, I go in and I zoom in 200% and I go square by square around the entire image looking for artifacts, for sensor spots, for anything that might make me regret printing this. Now, in each of these situations, this is something that I did for myself. Imagine how you would feel if you printed that out and sent it to a client who paid you $1,000 for this, and they get it hanging on the wall and go, what's that spot? So devil in the details. When you're editing for print, you have to pay more attention than you would normally do. So we'll go next to lighting. And when you have a image on your screen, it's backlit. It just glows. It's great. You edit it, you get it the way you want it. But when your customer goes to hang it, if it's hanging in a dark hallway or hanging someplace that doesn't have a dedicated light source, and what you're looking at down below here is my bar in my house. And these are all metal prints that I took at concerts and hung them up on the wall as a big metal print collage. And you can see I've got dedicated lighting in the ceiling here that washes this wall and provides it with plenty of light. So there wasn't really a need for me to do any kind of really special editing because I knew these prints were going to hang in a place where they had lighting on them. And when you go to do this, though, for somebody that you don't know what their environment's going to be in, or you're putting it out there and somebody just randomly buys it, you don't know who they are or for what purpose they bought it. There's something you can do that'll help a little bit in terms of the presentation. I put a note in there about helping design the environment. And I get asked to consult. They want to buy some of my work, and I just say, okay, well, let's talk about it. How big? What colors, schemes do you have going on? What kind of lighting are you going to have available for it, et cetera? That is something I love doing because I know that in the end, what's going to happen is the prints are going to look the best they possibly can. And so that's something I really enjoy doing. And then what format will the print be in? So is it going to be on canvas? Is it going to be on metal? Is it going to be framed behind a reflective glass or a museum glass? So these kinds of questions, I think, are relevant, as well as how's it going to be displayed or presented? Is it actually being printed in a magazine or something else? So to the extent you can get the information around how this work is going to be presented, it can help you in your editing to produce something when it's printed looks best. So this is an example here of lighting. So this is an image from Caddo Lake of a blue heron that I took. And this is my edit for online viewing, for digital viewing. But notice how it brightens up there. So when I'm printing something and uploading it to the website for print, and I don't know what the end result in terms of lighting is going to be, I typically add about 2/3 of a stop of light to the image, only because that way the client who's looking at the image on the screen and goes, oh, I love that, when they get the print, they're not then kind of like, well, it's kind of dull. It's not, it doesn't pop the way it was on my computer screen. Now, a lot of people are going to know, hey, it's not backlit, but the last thing you want is someone to be disappointed in their purchase, that they've done. And so I think it's worth adding that little boost of light. And sometimes I will add the boost of light really only in the main primary focal area, rather than saying, hey, I'm going to light the whole thing. I will focus it in the area that is the primary focus of the entire image. And it really just depends on the image. And I think that's something you'll have to figure out as you go along. It'll also depend on whether I know it's being printed on a canvas or something else. That will kind of change the way I might adjust the lighting. But if I don't know how it's going to be lit, then I will probably go ahead and just add a little brightness to the whole image. Because printing is never going to be as bright as this. Even with lighting, it's not going to look the way it does here. Okay, so then let's talk about finishing. And what I'm talking about in terms of finishing really has to do with, you've kind of said, I'm good to go. So you've done a review of detail. You've zoomed in on it. You've gone through and looked at every possible square inch of the canvas. There's nothing that is an artifact or anything like that that's jumping out at you. And you feel like that's done. You've made a lighting adjustment for the environment. You've said, hey, I'm going to add a little brightness to it. You've said, all right, I'm going to put this in a folder that's for metal and acrylic prints because they're very bright anyway and very colorful. They're the types of images that typically go on there. Or no, it's going on a canvas with a matte finish, so I need to have a little more brightness to it. And then I've considered what its purpose was. So it's going to hang above someone's fireplace. It's going to be as part of a collage of nature photography, something along that. So you've gone through, you've checked all the boxes that you possibly can. So then the next thing that you should do is walk away from it and then come back for a review a little later. Is there any possible slight nuance change that would improve the work? And by that, I mean, do you have a bright spot next to the edge of the image that will draw the viewer's eye away from the focal point? Maybe you can darken that down a little bit. Is there a black hole? So there's a particular spot in the image that's fairly bright where it's just very black. It's very dark. There's no detail. There's no information. Can you brighten that up a little bit? Anything that causes the viewer to miss that central element. And of course, you want to be careful not to, for example, you've posted the image out on the internet, you've posted it social media, wherever, and someone says, oh, I love that, I want to buy it. You have to be careful not to get too far away from that edit because, I mean, that was their deal, right? That was what they were primarily interested in, was that particular look. So you have to be careful with that. But ultimately, what you want to do is really provide for whoever's buying it the best possible work. All right, printing, where and how. So I'm sure all of you, or many of you on here, have already used printers, commercial printers. And I've used BWC and Full Color for quite a long time. And I've been happy with both of them. I'll tell you, BWC at one of my shows, they did all the printing for my show, and they had a canvas issue. And for some of my images, there was it was almost like a film look over the image or something. And I first pointed it out. I said, "There's something wrong," and they took the time to go in. We pulled up all the images. We went through it all. We printed them out on paper, and they came back and they said, "Yeah, we've got an image. We got a problem with our canvas." And they reprinted the show, and gave me like $1,000 or $2,000 credit for any future images. So they stood behind their work, and I think Full Color would be exactly the same way. Bay Printing is who does my gallery work. So if somebody orders something online from my gallery, I've selected Bay Printing to be the printer. They're based out of California, I think. BWC is right here in Richardson. That's one of the reasons I like using them, is they're close by. I can just run by and pick up any prints from the lab. Full Color is down in Dallas, kind of off of, I think they're off of 20, if I remember right. So a little bit of a drive to get there. Both of them will actually deliver depending upon the size of the order. WHCC is White House Custom Color. They're another print firm that I know several printers have used. And then I say specialized because for one print that I did, it was on metal. It was 10 feet long. And BWC, Full Color, nobody could handle that. I had to go to a specialty shop down in Dallas, and they did a really good job. And if you are in the need for something like that, holler at me and I can help you. Maybe try to find, what will meet your needs. And then, how to get images to your printer. So let's say you've decided, all right, I'm going to print something, and it's not a a 4x6 or an 8x10 or something, I'm going to start printing work for display at a gallery or something like that. Where to go? And I would say you could take it to your printer with a thumb drive or a card. And so you give them a file, and most of the time they'll accept JPEGs or TIFF files. You could upload it through a file transfer system. So a lot of them will have a place where you go online and you just upload it in a file transfer. But most of them are going to prefer you to use what's called ROSE, Remote Order Entry System. And the thing about ROSE that is helpful for you and for them, one is they typically charge you the lowest rate if you use ROSE. And that in that system is where you're able to say, hey, I want the image this size. I want a black backer on it. I want it with a beehive hanger versus a cable hanger. I want any number of things, special order, special request. So all of that is available to you in that order entry system so that you can, for every image, give them the specifications versus giving them a thumb drive or something. And then they have to go through and ask you, well, how do you want to handle this image? How do you want to handle this image? So I think ROSE, and it's a very basic, simple system to use. I found it extraordinarily simple from the very beginning. So I wouldn't be over concerned about it. If you go to bwc.net, you'll look at the ways to download or upload images, and ROSE will be there. You click on it and it'll want to have you download the system to do it. And that's fine. It works just fine that way. So let's talk a little bit about terminology. Lab corrected versus studio corrected. You're liable to see this pretty early on if you're using ROSE. And the deal there is the lab has its own monitors and everything, and they're all, color tuned. And you can ask the lab and say, hey, I want the lab to edit the color tones of my images, meaning I want to make sure that I haven't, because of my screen, somehow made the skin bluer than it's supposed to be, or something along those lines. And if you're doing a lot of portrait work, I don't know that that's a bad idea. If you're doing general portrait, if you're doing very creative portrait work, I think you want to just spend the time to make sure that what you're doing and your color palette that you're using is being accurately printed by the lab. But if you're doing, family shots, or you're doing the kids' sports, or, the team, and you're taking pictures of each of them in their uniform and stuff, lab correction's not bad, because they're going to make sure that the skin tones are right, all of that kind of stuff. So you could feel comfortable with that. On the other hand, you may go, I don't want anyone changing the color tones on my images, period. And that's tends to be my approach with that. A couple of times, I've gotten my report back from the printing, and it said lab corrected because I neglected to check the box for studio corrected in the entry system. And when I saw the images that were lab corrected, I couldn't tell that they weren't studio corrected. I couldn't tell that that wasn't my color palette. So I wouldn't get too stressed about it, but just something to be aware of. And then fine art versus digital prints. The digital prints are typically on a Fuji paper, luster, gloss, matte, whatever you might want, pearl, linen, versus fine art, which is going to be a different kind of paper. It's going to be a higher quality from an archival standpoint. The inks are different, and those also tend to be archival. So if you're doing and printing something that you think, oh, this is going to hang on someone's wall for, a few decades, I would consider going the fine art route. The digital printing is going to be cheaper. To give you an example, today I was looking at an 8x8 that I wanted to print. The digital printing was like $3. The fine art on the fine art paper, doing it on the fine art paper, was like $21. So it was a huge difference in price at that size. but ultimately it gets down to the quality of the work that you're trying to deliver. Gamut, some of you have probably heard of the gamut. It's basically the range of color tones that are available. Most labs are going to be fine with sRGB or Adobe RGB, Adobe Pro RGB, I think it is. They're limited to some degree by their printers. And so depending upon who you go to talk to, you may spend a little time with there. You can choose to have the prints mounted on a backer board. That's a high quality look. If you're selling prints to people and you have it mounted on a backer board, that's exhibiting quality in your work. I talked about beehive hangers. If you're not familiar with them, they make it really easy to hang stuff. But it's basically like a honeycomb corner that's on the edges of the prints or on the corners of the prints. And it just has tons of holes in it. So it's almost impossible not to get something level because you can just keep fine tuning the adjustments. Bleed, depending on what you're doing, there may be a need for you to oversize your image. By that, I mean, include some area outside what you really want printed so that it makes sure that when they go to trim the image that you're not losing something that you want. When you get a gallery wrap on a canvas, when it wraps around the edge of the frame, you could either get it black, you could pick a color from the image and use that as the border. You could get it mirrored, which typically means that they just take whatever's, if it's an 1.5 inch frame, they mirror whatever's on the front 1.5 inch of the canvas. The only thing to be careful with there is that if you have an object or a specific object right at the edge of the frame and it gets mirrored, if they can see that from the sides, it'll look a little odd. You can print on metal, acrylic, or canvas. Your metal and acrylic prints, the best options are your brightly colored image, your high detail images, things that you want very vivid and that you anticipate someone may get up close to. Canvas works really well for larger prints and particularly things that aren't really high resolution. Because the canvas, even with a very high resolution image, the canvas is going to eliminate some of that resolution anyway because of the nature of the canvas. And so canvases are good for large prints that you're not going to be standing right up close to. You have different finishes: luster, gloss, satin, pearl, linen. They all have different looks. I will tell you that, for example, when I just launched my gallery, I went in and found an image that I thought someone might want to buy, and I ordered copies of it in it was a 9x12 image, and I ordered 9x12s in their paper types with different finishes, and it cost me $150, $200, something like that. But now I have an actual example, so I know what my client is going to get whenever they order something. And if they ask for guidance, I can give them guidance about what might look best for them and their situation. And then decal is a word that is related to, if you've seen images where the paper's torn at the edges, and you can get it in a very tiny decal or a large, looks like somebody ripped the piece of paper. So those are all images, or excuse me, all words that you may come across as you're going to print, and things to consider as you're creating your image and getting ready to kind of market it. What might it look like, in these different formats? And, what's the purpose for it? Can I get by with the $3 print, or should I spend the $20? Are they willing to pay that much for it? Okay, so let's talk about resolution, how the human eye works. We can see what's called a variance between black and white at about 1/60th of a degree, so to speak. And that's in optimum viewing situations: bright light, pure black, pure white. And that's standing at about, I think it's about 4 feet. If you back up, you're going to gradually lose more and more ability to see detail. And a good example of this is, a billboard, because a billboard is at like 10 pixels per inch. I mean, you would think, oh my God, how is anyone ever going to be able to see this and not see these, it's speckles? Because you're so far away from it. Your eye cannot resolve that resolution from that distance. And as a matter of fact, if you get beyond about 8 feet from a print, really having anything more than about 150 pixels per inch is meaningless. It's not going to make that big a difference because our eye just can't see that resolution any better. Now, the way that works is this. If you're printing something big, chances are people are going to be standing further away from it, right? So that's a benefit to you. So when we start thinking about in terms of our resolution for export, and it says, do you want to export at 100 ppi or 300 ppi, or what do you want to export this at? The tend to be 300 pixels per inch is considered magazine quality. Why is that? Well, because a magazine is something someone's usually holding within about 12 to 18 inches from their face, their viewing, maybe 24 inches. And so you need a high level of detail for that print to look really nice. But again, as you get further away from it, that requirement of 300 pixels per inch is not necessary. And then people hear about DPI, and the DPI might be 600, or it might be 1200, or some of the really, really expensive printers are like 2400 or even 3600 dots per inch. And dots has to do with a tiny dot of ink. So you have pixels, and when it goes to the printer, they have to convert that into dots per inch based on their machine so that they know exactly how many dots to put in. And it's unrelated to some degree to your pixels. The more pixels you have, the better quality that DPI will be, but it may not be necessary. So, and then the who am I just threw that in there because I thought trying to explain PPI versus DPI is, if people get confused, like, who am I? PPI, DPI, who am I? So I would encourage you, to the extent you can, export at 300 pixels per inch for anything that's going to be printed. Your printer will like it, everything else, but you may not have the ability to do that if you're going really large. It may not give you the quality that you want. The highest quality is going to be at the higher end. In terms of the print quality, the more pixels you have, the better. But I've got a grid I'm going to show you where it'll help you, I think, understand how big my image is in terms of pixels, height and width is going to help me determine what's the best quality I can get from that. And, again, who can tell at some point? And it depends on what size your print's going to be. If you're just printing an 8x10 for someone, that's pretty easy to do with today's cameras. I mean, even an old cell phone could print a really good quality, 8x10. And then ultimately it'll matter what the viewing distance is. And I put this formula in here. I don't know if anyone really wants to get that deep into it. If I can do this, maybe before we leave, I'll drop in the chat this link right here. What print resolution works for what viewing distance? And this is actually an article, I think, from like 2006 or something, but it's the best article I've ever seen describing the connection between what we can see with our eyes, what the printer is printing based on the number, using DPI based on the number of pixels that are available to them. So I'll try to get that and send it, put it in the chat or something like that. And I think that will be, if you read that, I think a lot of this will be very clear to you. So this is a spreadsheet that I put together, and I know it's available on the alumni page. For those that are alumni, if you go to the files link, you can find this spreadsheet in there. Should be able to anyway. But if you look at your image and you enter in the pixels, how wide the pixels are, and then what the height is in terms of pixels, it'll give you a total megapixels. And then on your resolution size, if you look at the megapixel count, so this one is 6.7 megapixels. So we're somewhere between the 6 and the 8. So if we look at the size of the image, 4:6 image, with this many megapixels, you're looking at a resolution of 500 ppi, which is more than enough for anything you want to do. As a matter of fact, if you start working your way out here, you'll see even at 274, you're really good. And because we're in between 6 and 8, you're probably right around 300 for an 8:10. That's great. If we come out here, we're probably around the 240, or excuse me, we're around the 200 or so at 11:14, which is probably also going to be pretty decent in terms of the quality. Particularly if you're printing on canvas, no one would ever tell the difference. It's when you get a little larger that you start getting these poor grades, let's just put it that way. And so typically when I'm exporting something for print, I go, okay, what do I need to do to get this large enough that I could have a really nice high resolution print? And I look at my pixel count and say, okay, what have I got that I can work with here? And this isn't a live version, so I can't go plug numbers in, but essentially you just plug it in. And if you said, well, I want to print something at 60:40, how many megapixels do I need in order to be able to get it magazine quality? You need a whole bunch. I mean, you're talking 100 megapixels, you're talking a medium format style camera. However, two factors impacting this. One is who's going to be standing 6 inches away from a 60:40 print and looking at it? Almost no one. So you probably don't need that higher resolution. And then secondly is there's been a new, in today's world with technology, we've got, AI and all of that, that's making it easier and easier to create very large images that have very good detail in them through upsizing. And so it's possible that, whatever this grid is anymore, I don't know how relative it is to say, well, I've only got 20 megapixels. This is all I can do. When the truth is with some of this AI stuff, you could turn that into 40 megapixels without too much effort and still have a really sharp, high quality image. Shipping would be the last thing that I don't know if you guys could see me, but I've suddenly got a bug in here. Some people worry about shipping. I will say that in all of the shipping that I've had done, first off, BWC, I go and pick it up. Typically full color, I go and pick it up, but that's for people that are here local and, they bought the image and I said, I'll just deliver it to you. I like delivering images or having them come pick it up. I like seeing their face when they see the final image. It's very rewarding. And I'm sure many of you have had that experience. But I have found that regardless of who was shipping, whether it be through Fine Art America, which uses a whole variety of images or printers, and we'll talk about that later, BWC, Full Color, Bay, all of them, the packaging that they do is sufficient. That doesn't mean that UPS, FedEx, or whoever isn't going to accidentally drop, something on a metal print and create a problem. I've had that happen once, and the carrier paid for the reprint of the image. I've had one situation where the image I got, I felt like the quality was not where it could be, and they happily reprinted the image for me. So packaging wise, I've not had any issues with it. Depending upon who you're using as a printer, they may just ship them to you. Some printers will actually drop ship. So you can place the order, give them the client's address, and they'll ship it directly to them. So you don't have to get into the middle of that there. Again, just depends on your situation, where the client's at, and everything else. The coordination of the shipping and stuff, though, may or may not be something you have to involve yourself with, depending upon the platform you're using. Again, something we'll talk about here in a few seconds. And then from a carrier standpoint, I've had images delivered by UPS. I've had them delivered by FedEx. I've had them delivered by a courier. I haven't really noticed any difference between them. So I wouldn't stress too much about that. And the rates tend to be pretty similar. And the rate will be determined by your lab anyway, if they're shipping it to you. So let's talk about marketing for a little bit. And this part is hard. I was watching something the other day that had to do with growing your business and stuff, and in particular in the art world. And they did it very eloquently, but in a nice way. They said, look, if you're creating pretty pictures and you're sitting around waiting on them to discover you, you could be waiting for a long time. So that means you have to be proactive about it. And that means putting your work out there. And that's difficult. It takes courage. I mean, you've got to stick something out there and be open to people criticizing it, judging it. And in today's social media world, if you don't get enough likes, then, oh, well, it must be terrible. And that's not necessarily the case. There's reasons why something gets a lot of likes or doesn't. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. You also have to think about it from a business standpoint. Your image, you have to kind of let go of it a little bit. It's almost like letting go of your child and saying, okay, it's got to stand on its own. I'm going to go market it, but I can't take it too personal what's happening to it or not happening to it. So you have to kind of step away a little bit. And as I say, consider it like a piece of chocolate or a widget. It's something someone else wants. How do I get more of that out there, right? It's not fun to market or the business side. I'm all in this. It's easy to put off the business because I'd rather go take pictures and edit and create. And so the business stuff kind of falls to the sideline. And ultimately, if I want to be successful in this and get to a point where I can spend even more time creating, I have to work hard on the business to get enough systems in place and revenue that I can afford to spend the time on the business or on the creation. The last sentence there, I think this is kind of the nuts of what that other presenter was talking about, is that there's a ton of photographers out there. I mean, we all know it. Just go look. I mean, if you're trying to break into event marketing, event photography, or anything else, there's just a long list of people that are out there doing it. Some of them are good and some of them are not. And so it's really going to be up to you to kind of get out there and work hard and get yourself discovered. And you may be a very talented photographer and have a lot of skills and produce amazing work, but somebody who's even less talented, but if they work the business side, they may be more successful than you are. So you have to kind of step away from the art side of it a little bit and spend some time focused on the business side. So social media, which one should I use? Next month, there's going to be another one that's the hot platform. Should I jump to that one? What the hell is an algorithm anyway? And why do they keep changing them? So which one should you use? Well, I think you find the one that you seem to have the most traction with. For whatever reason, that's where you get the most activity. For most people, I think it's Facebook. For a while, Instagram was the place for photographers, but it was primarily the place for photographers to see other photographers' work, not so much for public to go see, because when Instagram first took off, that's what it was all about, was just the photography. And it's not really that way anymore. And, the algorithm thing I'll talk about in a second. But, on Instagram now, the big thing is Reels. You need to be creating these little short video clips. And if you're not doing that, then you're not going to get traction. There's TikTok. You could sell your work on Etsy or Etsy or whatever. I've never quite figured that out. There's Pinterest, Reddit, YouTube. So there's all these different places. And I'd say just focus on a couple of them if you're getting started. if you get to a point to where you're like, okay, I've got pretty good traction in Facebook and Instagram, but I'm not really converting that into clients, then you start thinking about, well, should I be out on Pinterest or Etsy, whatever, where people are actually going to buy stuff, and you actually use that as kind of like a little mini storefront. But I think first you just need to start building some traction within the Facebook and Instagram world. The algorithms change because they're looking at what's working in terms of getting the most activity. And so they're constantly adjusting that based on what's going on. If you take a picture of something that is very hot and very viral, let's say you took pictures of that Chinese weather balloon or spy balloon or whatever you think it is, and you zoomed in on it and you caught a picture of it and you post that on Instagram or Facebook and you tag it with the China balloon or whatever, well, you're going to get a lot of traction because that's what everybody's looking for. If while that's going on, you're posting pictures of a bird like I've done or whatever, and instead of getting 100 likes on it, you get 15 or 20. It's not a validation or invalidation of your image. It's more a case of this is what the algorithm is doing. It's directing people to things that are more interesting current, because that drives ad revenue. You can always go in and run your own advertising and do boosting. And I will tell you that for me, at least, that has helped grow my Instagram in particular base. And from that, I have gotten people that have reached out to me and joined my mailing list, et cetera. So I think, yes, you should be doing social media. How can you maximize it? Being more consistent. And I struggle with this too, because again, it gets back to that's a business activity versus a creative activity. And you can leverage social media into a business. As a matter of fact, it's probably the easiest way to get started. Can I sell my work just using social media? I would say the answer is probably not. You're going to have to go further. So email marketing requires you to probably subscribe to like MailChimp or something that's going to allow you to start collecting email addresses where you can send out emails to people, because it's very targeted that way. And the people that are in your email address list are going to be people that want to hear from you, that want to see your work, that are interested in what you're doing. And so you send out things to them that says, here's my latest image. Here's what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think? Which one of these do you like? And you get responses and stuff like that. So I think that the email marketing is a place where if you've got some traction in social media, it's where you should start kind of heading. And it's something I'm having to learn right now, actually, and working hard on is figuring out a way to continue to grow my email addresses. There's a thought there, though, is that, look, I get so much junk mail already. How can I do this and not be annoying? Well, don't send them something every day first. And then secondly, the things that get the most traction are things that are personal versus something that looks from the very beginning, like, oh, this is a sales pitch. So learn to be more genuine in your writing and your titling. There are countless $29 how to do email marketing classes out there. There's a lot of free ones on YouTube about how to write subject lines in your emails. Managing it, as I mentioned, MailChimp, there's others. MailChimp is, I think, raising their rates. It's getting kind of expensive. So I think that's something, well, you'd have to just kind of explore a little bit when you get to that point. I'm still using MailChimp, and Benton Downs uses MailChimp for their email management. And we'll just have to see how it continues to change in terms of cost. But it is an extremely efficient way because you can schedule emails months in advance. You can put together campaigns and all of that. And bottom line, is it worth it? I think I've just started discovering that it's worth it since I started doing it for personal. Barry and I think Barry would agree, is we haven't done a great job with our email list and managing it. But I'm starting to try to, because of my personal efforts, trying to get that to be more active for Benton Downs as well. And then exhibitions. And so Barry and I did one together. I did a couple prior to that on my own. And then I have another one coming up the end of this year. And I think Barry's done with the exhibitions, he told me. They're a lot of work. If you're doing a large, like this one was, I think combined we had 80 some odd pieces in there, something like that, plus matted prints and note cards, greeting cards, and everything else. It was a lot of work and it was a lot of expense. And I don't know whether or not, I'm pretty sure, like the last show, I don't think that I walked away with a profit. Now, over time, some of the images that didn't sell at the show did manage to sell. And that was good to have those. It also gave me stuff to use for marketing purposes. I could donate them to an auction at a nonprofit or something like that, who they were like, oh, we'd love to have a piece of your work in our auction. Fine, put it out there, put a few of your cards out. And now you have an image of yours that's in front of a whole group of people. And your image is displayed proudly because they want people to buy it. So you can do them solo, you could do them joint, like I said, that I'd done with Barry. Clubs will sometimes do exhibitions together. And there's art associations that do it. And I know some of you on this call already participating in that. And then there's competitions, and the competitions can give you some recognition as well. If you do well in a competition, you're able to then kind of promote that and say, hey, I just won a prize at this. And people are drawn to communication about other people's success because they either want to know how are they successful, they want to celebrate them being successful, something like that. So I think exhibitions are also a good way to kind of market yourself and get yourself out there. Okay, selling. What kind of platforms do we have, and what's the difference between them, and value and pricing? So as I said, whatever exists today, it may not exist tomorrow, and the day after that, a new option will enter the field of play. So you can get what we refer to, at least in my real job. Many of you know I'm a financial advisor in my real world job, my full-time job. But many times we talk about clients getting what we call paralysis by analysis, meaning that they just get overwhelmed and feel like they have to analyze every single thing, every single option before they can find something that will meet their needs. And I'm guilty of that. I've done it. Barry would be the first to tell you that I'm not always real good at making quick decisions on something. He's more apt to say, yeah, that looks good. Let's go. Let's do this. And I'm still analyzing whether or not there was a different way to approach it or something. There was another person I know and highly respect, and his words were ready, fire, aim. So in other words, don't spend too much time aiming, which I don't necessarily agree with that, but the point is that don't get so stuck in trying to find the perfect solution that you lose time, energy, everything else that could have been spent getting your work out there, starting to maybe generate some sales and some traffic. And almost more valuable than that on the front end is just the experience of actually working within a system. So, I mean, we look at this list here. So you can create your own website. And if you do that, you're going to need, all right, I can display my images, but how does someone place an order on there? Oh, well, I've got to go out and I've got to team up with Squarespace or Square, or I've got to team up with Stripe, or I've got to find a shopping cart app. There's a lot of things that go into making a website the ideal place to actually sell work, sell your images. And I'll talk through that a little bit more. So the sites that I am familiar with, that I've worked with, is SmugMug. I had that for quite a while. They have a good reputation. I felt like, for me anyway, that I wasn't getting really, one, the assistance that I needed. It was one of my very first attempts at paying for a website / storefront. And they had an option that you could get an upscaled assistance package, and they would help you design your own website, and they would modify the templates they've got to fit what your needs were. They would help you with pricing. They would help you with all this stuff, but it was expensive. The basic SmugMug site that I signed up for at the time was like $380 or something. And that was about all I could afford. If you're doing portrait work and shooting a lot of pictures or of families or kids and stuff, and you need that ability to put them into a folder where somebody can go through and select the ones they want, and then you're able to take and package those up and send them to them and create packages of, 5x7s and 18 wallets and, whatever. SmugMug, I think, actually is designed to do that pretty well. Zenfolio, Barry and I think we still have our Zenfolio site that we were using when we first started what was called City Stock, which was basically stock images from the area here around Plano. It was a little clunky. They may have updated it by now. It's still, I think, considered pretty highly out there among photographers as a place to show their images, show their work, sell them. And I know that people also use that for, again, the same kind of the portrait work where the client goes in and picks the images they want, that kind of thing. Squarespace is pretty popular right now. Clean, very nice looking front end on it. I never went that direction because when I went and researched it, I felt like there wasn't enough flexibility, then that everyone's Squarespace site seemed to look the same. And so I didn't go that direction. I left SmugMug and went to Fine Art America. And what I found at Fine Art America when I first joined it, and this was been about 5 years ago, maybe, something like that, maybe 4, it's probably 5, is that I suddenly was getting unsolicited sales. I was getting purchases from people that I didn't know, and I didn't know how they even found out about me. I had people buying my work from Britain, from Australia, from Southern California, from a lot of different places. And I was actually very, very happy with Fine Art America there for a while. And then it just seemed like that kind of just died off, and I wasn't certain why. They kind of implemented an across the board 20% off that was just like continuous, meaning that if you had to opt out of it, you were automatically opted in. You had to opt out of it. And if you opt out of it, then your work wouldn't be showing up as promoted. And so that kind of made me dissatisfied with them. I liked their interface, the amount of products. They still, in my opinion, have the greatest range of merchandise that's available for sale of any of the platforms that are out there. With SmugMug, I'm backing up a sec, with SmugMug, you chose a single printer to do your work. And in my case, when I was with SmugMug, I was using Bay Photo again. Zenfolio, I don't remember ever trying to print anything through there, so I'm not sure how they work, but I think it's the same way. You have 1 or 2 printers that you can choose from. In Fine Art America, you don't choose the printer; they do, and they have an arrangement with printers around the country and around the world, for that matter. And so you don't really know who's going to be printing your work. And so that was another thing that kind of set me back, because I did have a poor experience in one of those situations with Fine Art America. Now, They took care of it, but it took me a little bit of work to get that done, because I originally went to the printer who printed it, and they were pushing back. And it was only after I contacted Fine Art America that suddenly, it got handled. Running through the rest of them, there's Alamy, iStock, Shutterstock. Those are all stock, Getty stock. There's a new one out now where you can subscribe and go to one place, upload your images, and they will take care of pushing those out to all of these stock image galleries. Keep in mind that with these stock images stuff, you might receive a dime, a penny. It just depends on what it's being used for. I've got 500 Pix on here. I use 500 Pix as an inspiration thing because there's some amazing photography that takes place on that website, 500pix.com. I think in terms of overall quality, if you go there and you see their top photos, the ones that are getting the most traction, that top 3-4 pages, probably 200-300 images that you would see are all extraordinarily high quality images from people that have a tremendous amount of talent. And so I use it more as an inspiration point. But if you have an account there, you can set up your own gallery. You can set up your own storefront, and you can sell images from them. I've never done it. I'm not sure what how their system works. YouPic is the same way. You can go and post pictures there, and I'm on there. I post pictures there. They also offer, depending upon your level of membership, a free gallery site and your ability to sell work through YouPic. Photo Shelter is another one that offers a way to sell your work. And then where I'm at now is I have my own website at daviddowns.com, and I've paid to have that built. I pay to have it linked to a scheduling tool. I pay to have it linked to MailChimp. I pay a lot of different add-ons so that it works properly. And then I use Art Storefronts as my gallery. And Art Storefronts, here's what they do, which no one else in any of these other sites do, is that they provide marketing support. They have an entire playbook of how to market, where to go, which social media places to use, how to use them most effectively. They give you a calendar. On this day you do this, on this day you do this, on this day you do this, on this day you do this. And every single day, Monday through Friday, they have a tech call and a marketing call. And you can just log in if you're part of Art Storefronts and ask a question. You can listen to them talk to other people about how to handle their situations. The Art Storefronts thing that's unique a little bit too, though, is that the people that are on there are not just photographers. There's a lot of them that are painters, they're sculptors, they're weavers, they're everything that you can imagine. So that all sounds great, right? Bottom line is, still takes a ton of work to make that work for you. And for every person that's on there going, wow, I sold something today, there's somebody else saying, I've been on here 6 months, I haven't sold anything. This thing sucks. And I think it's a partially driven by, what you put in, you'll get out. So I think you have to kind of think about that a little bit. All right, so let's keep going. How they differ in the services they offer. So that's kind of what I was just talking about. And exposure. So some of them offer just purely a place to show your images, and that's it. Others offer exposure because they will include you in their promotions that they do. Some of them give you various printing options. You can choose your printer, and others don't give you any option. Some of them are very flexible. Some of them offer a website. Some of them are not. They're just simply a storefront, and that's all it is. There's nothing else for you to do. Some of them are very easy to use. Others require you to be almost a programmer in order to be able to get what you want out of it. Some of them cost more. I'll be upfront. The art storefronts, to have the gallery built, although I did a lot of the work, wound up doing a lot of the work myself because I was impatient, wanted to get it done. But having the website built and pulled together, and then I paid for 42 months of hosting and all of the service that comes with it, which is the ability to log into all those calls and get all my questions answered and everything else. That was about $4,200. So that was a big expense. You don't have to do that. They run specials all the time where they waive the website building fee. If you subscribe for, 24 months for $1,500, I bought add-ins that you don't have to have. So, those can vary. Every single site out there, though, is going to take a cut of every image you sell. Unless, like with art storefronts, if I can promote an image and say it's an original work, meaning I've got it and I can promote it, sell it however I want, and they don't take any cut. I get all of it. So for me, if I've got a buyer who is here local, and I can have them buy the print through the website, but then fulfill it local. So I don't have to pay the fee, but now I've got a shopping cart. I've got the ability to capture the email address. I've got all of this information and tools that I can work with, and I didn't have to pay somebody for it. So that varies. And then functionality, and this is, again, getting back to how they're going to do this. Fine Art America, SmugMug, Zenfolio, if anybody goes to one of those sites, finds your image and buys it, you don't know who they are. You don't know how they found you. You don't have any way of contacting them. You don't have anything. Their email address and their information is the property of Fine Art America. It's the property of whoever, SmugMug, whatever. If it's somebody that that you sent there, great. You already know who they are. But since I set up art storefronts, I own, and I'm not trying to promote art storefronts. I'm trying to differentiate between what's out there, because there's other competitors to art storefronts that function the same way. I own all that data. If someone comes and buys something off my site, I get the ability to send them an email thanking them, appreciate you, spending the time on the site, finding something that fits your needs and purchasing it. I get the ability to say, wow, if you like that image, here's another one. And by the way, I'll send you an email if I ever have a sale. And so now I've got that ability with a market of people that like my work to continually market to them. And so ultimately, when you look through all of this stuff, you have to ask yourself, what's important for you now? And then maybe for the next 3 to 5 years, assuming you're successful in growing your business, because my guess is if you're successful in growing it, your needs will change. So you have to kind of start with, well, what's important to me now? And I'm going to start there. Questions to ask yourself: do I want to handle shipping? Do I already have a website, or do I need a new one? Am I good with business accounting, invoicing, et cetera, or do I want the software to try to do that, or the site to do it for me? What kind of showcase do I want to have for my images, or do I even need one? Maybe what you're doing, you don't need to show off a bunch of images. You can just use social media. If you're doing infant photos or you're doing senior photos, maybe all the marketing you need and the only place you need to show a few images is on social media. You don't need a gallery, right? How much control do I want to have? Do I want marketing assistance? I think that's a huge one, because the other thing that I spent years doing is going out to YouTube and watching video after video on how to market. And ultimately, what I needed was someone to say, here's the marketing program. Do this on this day, do this on this day, do this on this day. And you will grow your database of people that are interested in your work. How much time do I want to spend on technology and business? And then how much am I willing to pay for any or all of these? So lots of questions to ask yourself. But I think those will help you kind of narrow down what it is that you need from a platform to try to sell your work. And then the last thing we'll talk about is pricing. And I broke it into 3 parts: services, what's your hourly rate? So, how much should you charge someone to do a senior photo shoot? And some of you may already have your pricing and everything, and that's great. You think, well, I'm going to spend an hour with them, so that's $50 or that's $100 or whatever, but you shouldn't sell yourself short. And this is not something I should probably talk about with any pride, because for years I felt I wasn't good enough, and then I was just giving away work. But don't forget too, you've got to edit the images, you've got to prep for the shoot, you've got to travel there. And then think about too, from a service analogy, there are clients that it doesn't matter if you charge them $500. At the end of the day, that wasn't enough. And so I think sometimes we get anxious and think we've got to get every job, and we've got to, we've got to have this opportunity. But it might be worth asking yourself, in the end, is this going to cost me more than I could even possibly charge them? Obviously, go out and look at what other photographers are doing. You can, judge yourself based on how their work looks compared to what you're doing. But keep in mind, at every price point, if you said, hey, I'm going to charge $500 for a senior photo session with no prints, it's $500. There are customers willing to pay that if the value is evident in terms of the image quality and service. There are customers willing to pay $2,500 if the image's quality is good. And if you're right now worried my image quality maybe isn't just where I want it to be, even though it's good, you're just like, I know I can be better. Well, blow their socks off with service. And then as you get more experience, your skill will improve. And pretty soon you'll say, wow, I'm undercharging for what I do. So there's a way to do that with service that is impactful, that goes beyond the images. And that's just the customer experience, because you're working directly with them. For prints, don't think about it as being a price for the print. So I mentioned earlier, like $3 digital 8x8 print. But I spent time editing that, so I had some hour costs in there, right? And then I had to pay for this camera and the lens that allowed me to capture the image. And then the quality is important. So if you're buying images from, a Walgreens or someplace, then I encourage you to consider looking at a professional print lab for it. I won't get into self-printing because there are people that are very tech savvy. I've chosen not to go that direction. I'll spend my brain cells in a different way, and not drinking wine. I'm talking about something else. But anyway, so the quality is important. And you can, if you buy the right equipment, produce very high quality prints right at home. So you target a 250 to 350% markup on print costs for high quality images over about 11x14. So if it costs me $500 to print a 24x30 image, I'd start out at, $1,000, $1,100, something like that. I might run a sale, so in the end they wind up getting it for $850 or $900. If you're smaller size prints, your markup should be a lot higher, because you're still having to do the same amount of work. The print cost is less, but all the other work still had to take place. And you probably ought to target an 8x10 at $50 anyway. And I think I'm being pretty low there. I know portrait photographers that for an 8x10 print are going to charge you, $150, $200. Now it may be mounted on a Masonite back and everything else. Don't forget to include your shipping. And certainly there's taxes due. If you're shooting portrait sessions and selling prints, you have to collect taxes on that. And then for rights, you have to ask yourself, what's the use? Is it a one-time print? Is it a 3-month web presence? It's their, front page, landing page on their website for the next 3 months. Are they printing 10,000 flyers or a billboard? How long do they want the right to use it? Do they want it to be exclusive? I never give anything exclusive to the point to where I don't even have the right to use it. or I haven't yet. I'm considering for my show doing some prints where the buyer gets the print and the file on a thumb drive that it came from, so that there won't be another one like it. And then consider using an attorney. If you're selling rights in any way, shape, or form, make sure you have some kind of legal document that's clearly laying out, here's what all of the considerations should be. And, you know, the details on how long it's going to last, et cetera, and what remedy there is if they exceed their rights, their usage. What does that remedy look like for your, for you? Okay, my voice is tired. We're at Q&A, and I'm going to stop sharing my image and see if there's anyone still here. Okay, there's 25 people still here, and I can see a couple of people looking at me, so not everybody fell asleep. It was kind of dense information. And I went through very quick, like I said, compared to the course that I used to do. And so I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any questions, just some comments. Feel free to unmute yourself if you want. And Barry, I'd love for you to just kind of chime in, because Barry has far more experience at all of this than I have, because he's been doing it for so long. He's probably got some better tips than I provided.
No, you did great. It was awesome. Great information as usual, very thorough, and well done. No.
Well, high praise from Barry. Questions? There has to be some,
yes,
because I mean, that was.
Sherry had a question about copyright, and yes, you should always have the copyright on all your photos. And that should be in your EXIF data. So when you import your photos through Lightroom or however you're doing it, that information should automatically drop into your photos. That's something
So
that covers on other.
Yeah, let me, I just signed up for, I'm trying to find the email. It's the, all right, write this down, NANPA. It's the, I think it's the North American Nature Photographers Association. And they have coming up the end of this month, I think it's the end of this month, they have an attorney who specializes in copyright issues, who's going to do it's 3 courses. It's free, 3 courses over 3 days. And I don't know what the rest of the dates are or anything. But it's free, and it's all about how do you copyright your work? How do you protect it? How do you use it? Lots of good information. So great question. And there you go. Look at Barry filling in for me here. But I put the copyright information in my camera, so it writes it into the EXIF data on the image. And then I also have it in my software, in my editing software too. So if I export something, it's also included that way as well. Gotten paid for them, haven't done anything as far as reporting income or doing IRS paperwork. So Larry, I think, you know, I was the same way for a while. I mean, I would do, I got hired to go to like a company event and shoot pictures, and they'd give me $300 cash at the end of the night or something. And then I'd upload the photos to them. I wasn't worried about it. It wasn't until I started, you know, I went and did some commercial stuff, and then I had an event where they, you know, I said, well, I'll charge you $500. And the woman who was coordinating it, who was a friend of mine and who had asked me to come do it because she had seen my event photos from some other events, said, we paid the last guy $3,000. I'll tell him you're $2,000. Well, at that point, I had to start because they wanted a W-9 from me because they're going to expense this and they're going to send me a W-9 or a 1099 and everything else. Well, at that point, I really had to say, okay, I've got to take this serious. So if you're making, $200-300 here or there, not a big deal. If you're doing it regularly and generating, a few $1,000s a year, I would say to be safe and get your tax ID number and go ahead and start charging some tax and reporting it. And so that you're not ever losing sleep at night worrying about it.